Sovereignty is not a gift. It is stolen. July 2nd. Ouagadougou. Ibrahim Traoré stood before his people. 36 years old, voice steady, uniform worn by dust, not ceremony. His words were not poetry. They were a warning. For decades, Africa was told freedom came through ballots, supervised in Paris, constitutions approved in Washington, loans written in Brussels. But look closer. Each promise carried a chain. Each handshake cost a nation's breath. Now, a new truth cuts through the lies. Sovereignty is not something the West will hand over. It is something they have already taken, again and again, and only a people ready to defend it can ever claim it back. Meanwhile, in Abuja, Julius Maada Bio played the part of the obedient messenger. He spoke of order, while his own citizens starved. He spoke of democracy while silencing dissent. Two Africas revealed in 1 week. One, kneeling for approval. The other, rising in defiance. So, here is the question. History is forcing on us. If sovereignty has always been stolen, who dares to keep profiting from our silence? Stay with us, because this isn't just another story. It's the future our ancestors dreamed of. Subscribe and join us for an Africa that no longer bows its head. July 1st. 2025. Abuja, Nigeria. The conference hall glittered with flags, polished wood, and the sound of forced applause. Julius Maada Bio walked to the podium, not as a servant of his people, but as a messenger for powers far beyond Africa. He smiled, waved, and then delivered words that carried the sting of betrayal. Mali, Niger, Guinea, Burkina Faso return to constitutional order. Step down, obey. But listen closely. The accent was not his. It was the voice of Paris echoing through his throat, the rhythm of Washington beating beneath his script. ECOWAS, once a dream of unity, now sounded like a weapon forged in foreign capitals, aimed at the very nations it was meant to defend. Outside that hall, Sierra Leone was burning in silence. In Freetown, teachers begged for salaries months overdue. Hospitals turned away the sick because shelves were bare. Young men and women filled the streets, chanting not for revolution, but for survival. They wanted justice, bread, dignity. Their president gave them speeches in English and French accents, but no answers. This is the naked contradiction. How does a man whose own people march against him dare to lecture others about democracy? How does a president, deaf to the cries of unpaid workers, suddenly claim the right to dictate to millions beyond his borders? It is hypocrisy, painted as leadership. It is betrayal wrapped in law. Abuja was supposed to be celebration. Instead, it was exposure. Bio, once photographed beside Ibrahim Traoré under the hot Ouagadougou sun, raising a fist for sovereignty, now stood draped in Western protocol. The man who once praised resistance now scolded resistors. The fist once raised, with the people now clutched papers written in another man's ink. Africans know this pattern too well. The names change politicians, presidents, envoys, but the story is the same. One day, they speak of freedom. The next, they kneel for permission. The tragedy is not ignorance, it is choice. They choose applause in Brussels over respect in Bo. They choose borrowed phrases in Abuja over the raw voices in Freetown. And the people are not blind. They see the contrast. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré spoke plain words. Sovereignty is not a gift. It is stolen. He spoke with dust on his boots, not silk on his shoulders. He did not promise comfort. He promised struggle. And that struggle rang true because it came not from foreign scripts, but from the memory of betrayal. The memory every African carries. In Abuja, Bio's words sounded heavy, but they were hollow, heavy with protocol, hollow with truth. The applause that followed did not shake the ground. It echoed only in the marble walls. Outside, the continent asked a simple question. What authority can a man claim when his own house is collapsing? Authority without legitimacy is theater. Power without the people is decoration. Bio may hold the chair of ECOWAS, but the chair itself is wobbling. But the people of Sierra Leone already see him as a man serving Washington. Not West Africa. The people of the Sahel already hear his voice as the whisper of old masters. So the ceremony in Abuja was not a triumph. It was a mirror, and that mirror reflected two Africas, one kneeling, compliant, exhausted, waiting for approval, the other rising, stubborn, rough, willing to fight for dignity, even if it costs everything. Julius Maada Bio chose his side that day. But the people, from Freetown to Ouagadougou, from Bamako to Niamey, are already choosing theirs, and they are not choosing submission. July 2nd, 2025, Ouagadougou, before the city stirred, before the dust of the streets lifted, Ibrahim Traoré stood at a podium that was more battlefield than stage. 36 years old, uniform worn, boots scarred. His voice did not tremble. It carried the weight of generations. Sovereignty is not a gift. It is stolen. The words were not spoken for applause. They were carved into the silence like a warning, like a drumbeat before war. In that moment, every man, woman, and child who had known the sting of betrayal heard their own story. For decades, Africa was told, independence comes with signatures in European capitals. Democracy comes when Western observers nod. Prosperity comes with loans wrapped in chains. But behind every gift was a theft. Behind every handshake was a hand in the pocket. Traoré's message was not gentle. He did not call for patience. He called for fire in the soul. He said, sovereignty is never granted freely. It must be seized, defended, guarded as blood. His speech was not a performance. It was an alarm clock, waking a continent lulled to sleep by decades of foreign promises. The crowd did not cheer like spectators. They stood like witnesses. Mothers who remembered the hunger of the Sankara years, young men with scars from fighting insurgents in the north, elders who had watched French tanks roll and watched them leave, only to see their shadows return through diplomacy. Each one heard the same truth. Africa cannot afford to wait for permission any longer. Outside Ouagadougou, the words spread like fire. In Bamako, in Niamey, in villages where radios still carry voices across desert winds, the message struck. Not theory, not ideology. But survival. Sovereignty means food on the table, medicine in the clinic, dignity in the home. It means the right to decide, without being punished for daring to decide. And the timing was no accident. One day before, Julius Maada Bio in Abuja declared the Sahel must submit. Now, in Ouagadougou, Traoré declared the opposite. The Sahel must resist. Two speeches, two worlds. Separated by less than 24 hours but divided by centuries of memory. In Abuja, the air was thick with perfume and protocol. In Ouagadougou, it was thick with dust and defiance. Abuja promised order, enforced from above. Ouagadougou promised. Struggle embraced from below. Abuja bowed to Europe. Ouagadougou stared it down. Africans know which voice is true. They know which man speaks their pain. They see Bio hiding behind marble and microphones. And they see Traoré standing in the open, shoulder to shoulder with the people. One speaks for approval, the other speaks for survival. And the people respond to survival. In Ouagadougou that day, silence turned to song. Women raised chants from the Sankara era, their voices trembling with both grief and pride. Youth painted Traoré's face on their cheeks, not as decoration, but as a declaration. This man is not just a president. He is the symbol of our refusal. Foreign capitals heard his words. Too. In Paris, in Washington, in Brussels. They understood the danger, not the man alone, but the millions who echoed him. Sovereignty defended by one soldier. That is why his speech was more than politics. It was prophecy. It said, the old cycle is breaking. It said Africa has finally woken to the truth that freedom is never offered, only taken back. And so the question left hanging in Ouagadougou was sharp. If sovereignty has always been stolen, what will it take for Africans to seize it once and for all? 1 year can expose a man. In 2024, Julius Maada Bio stood under the blazing sun of Ouagadougou. The air was heavy with dust and drums. The square packed with people who came not for spectacle, but for survival. Beside him was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the soldier who had become the hope of Burkina Faso. Cameras captured the moment. Two fists raised high. Two leaders, speaking of sovereignty. dignity, resistance. The crowd roared, not because they believed in Bio, but because they believed the words he spoke that day. Africa must own its destiny. And for that brief moment, Bio looked like a man ready to walk shoulder to shoulder with a new generation. But 2025 stripped away the mask. In Abuja, Bio did not raise his fist. He raised a paper. He did not speak of sovereignty. He spoke of constitutional order. His words matched almost word for word the declarations coming from Brussels and Paris. The same man who once praised defiance now demanded obedience. The same man who once walked in Ouagadougou dust now hid behind ECOWAS curtains. Contrast that with Traore. He was younger, poorer. Without the polish of European education or Western blessing, he stripped away medals, refused luxuries, and wore the same uniform as his soldiers. His speeches were not written by foreign advisors, but drawn from the wounds of his people. He carried the memory of betrayal, and he spoke it aloud. Bio chose a distance. Traore chose closeness. Bio sought applause in foreign halls. Traore found it in village squares. Bio wrapped himself in protocol. Traore wrapped himself in memory. The betrayal of Bio cut deeper than any insult from the West, because it was not spoken in French or English. It was spoken in the accent of a fellow African. It is one thing when outsiders dictate. It is another when your own brother repeats their commands. Africans know this pain. It is the pain of watching hope rot into hypocrisy, of seeing solidarity collapse into submission. And the people saw the difference. They saw one leader chasing approval, and another risking everything to guard dignity. They saw one who bowed his head, and one who kept it unbent. They saw Bio framed as a statesman in Abuja, while Traore was painted on the cheeks of children in Ouagadougou. Africa is tired of leaders who sound like echoes of colonial capitals, tired of politicians who exchange the cries of their people for seats at foreign tables. That is why the reversal of Bio stings so fiercely. He knew the words of sovereignty. He once spoke them, and now he has traded them for scripts written elsewhere. Meanwhile, Traore stands firm. Sovereignty is not a gift. It is stolen. He does not sugarcoat the struggle. He does not promise an easy road. He promises only resistance. And the people believe him because they have lived that resistance in their bones. Look at the imagery. Bio, polished, hidden, distant, guarded by convoys. Traore, dusty, open, vulnerable, walking among the crowd. Bio's power is borrowed. Traore's strength is lived. Marble versus dust. Silence versus fire. And here is the question, burning in every African ear. Which leader truly represents the people? The one who speaks in borrowed words, or the one who dares to speak the truth of their wounds? The streets already gave their answer. In Ouagadougou, youth painted Traore's face on their cheeks, not as decoration, but as declaration. In Freetown, youth tore down Bio's posters, chanting that he no longer speaks for them. Two leaders, two faces, one praised abroad, the other defended at home. This is more than politics. It is memory against amnesia, courage against compromise. Africa, at the crossroads, forced to choose which face it will follow. So we ask you, the sons and daughters of Africa across oceans, who carries your hope? The man who praises sovereignty when convenient, or the man who risks his life to defend it when dangerous? If you believe this is what Africa needed all along, say Amen in the comments below. July 3rd, 2025. Ouagadougou. The afternoon sun burned, but the streets did not empty. They filled. Tens of thousands poured out of homes, schools, mosques, and farms. They did not come with guns. They came with flags, with drums, with memory. The red, green, and gold of Burkina Faso waved like fire in the wind. Children painted Ibrahim Traoré's face on their cheeks, not as a game but as a shield. Elders raised their fists, silent but unshakable. Women sang the old songs of Thomas Sankara, their voices trembling with history, yet sharp with defiance. This was not a protest. It was a presence. Ouagadougou became a living wall, a statement written in bodies and voices. Touch, Traoré, and you touch our blood. And it spread without command, from Dore to Bobo Dioulasso. From Mopti in Mali to Jau in Niger, the same scenes erupted. Markets emptied. Churches and mosques released their faithful into the streets, and entire villages stood together. There were no generals issuing orders, no political parties staging rallies. This was instinct. The instinct of a people who had seen betrayal too many times and decided, not again. They remembered French tanks that rolled in decades earlier. They remembered the silence of the United Nations when massacres scarred their lands. They remembered promises of aid that never arrived, loans that built nothing but debt, leaders who bowed and called it diplomacy, and now they remembered something else. A young captain who stood and said, "Sovereignty is not a gift." The air pulsed with rhythm, but beneath the songs lay steel resolve. Mothers told their children, "This time, we defend ourselves." Young men whispered, "If he falls, we fall with him." Old men, long bent by poverty, straightened their backs to stand in the crowd. Every body was a barricade, every voice a warning. And the warning was not for Traore. It was for ECOWAS. It was for Julius Maada Bio. It was for Brussels and Washington. The message was simple. You may threaten sanctions. You may threaten blockades, but you will not break us. This time, the shield is not an army. It is the people. Foreign observers tried to dismiss it. They called it orchestrated, manipulated, fueled by propaganda. But Africans knew the truth. There was no coordination, because there was no need. Hunger coordinates faster than any party. Betrayal mobilizes quicker than any slogan. The memory of humiliation is a language spoken without translation. That day, Ouagadougou became the beating heart of resistance, but the pulse spread across the Sahel like veins of fire. In Mali, young men climbed rooftops, waving banners that read "No more puppets." In Niger, women blocked roads with cooking pots, banging them until the noise drowned out the silence of fear. In Burkina Faso's villages, farmers stopped work and marched to town squares, declaring their soil was not for sale. It was not about one man, though Traore's face was everywhere. It was about what he had come to mean. He was no longer just president. He was the symbol of a generation's last stand against recolonization. And this frightened the powers more than any army could, because you can negotiate with generals, you can bribe politicians, you can assassinate leaders, but you cannot erase a movement carried in the blood of millions. So the world watched. The cameras of foreign media tried to frame it as unrest, instability, chaos. But those who stood in the streets knew the truth. It was not chaos. It was clarity. Clarity that Africa has had enough of the lies, enough of the debts, enough of being told when to rise and when to kneel. This was the Sahel saying, "We rise on our own terms." From Ouagadougou to Bamako, from Niamey to Jau, the same chorus rang out. Not rehearsed, not scripted, but real. A chorus that made every foreign diplomat shift uncomfortably in their seats. Because beneath the songs, beneath the painted faces and raised fists, one truth was louder than all the rest. Sovereignty belongs to the people, and the people are ready to defend it. July 3rd, 2025, Freetown, Sierra Leone. The streets told a different story from the polished words of Abuja. Posters of Julius Maada Bio, freshly printed to celebrate his new title as chair of ECOWAS, were ripped down and trampled underfoot. Chants filled Cotton Tree Square. You serve Washington, not West Africa. The anger was not rehearsed. It was raw, urgent, personal. Youth-led movements, Student Union, and local workers poured into the streets. Their demand was not complicated. They accused Bio of abandoning national dignity for foreign applause. They accused him of selling the voice of Sierra Leone in exchange for a chair that spoke only foreign commands. Even former supporters turned cold, saying his words in Abuja sounded less like a president and more like an envoy for a country still struggling with unpaid salaries, collapsing hospitals, and disillusioned youth. The hypocrisy was unbearable. How could a leader so weakened at home now claim to dictate democracy abroad? It was as if the man who could not clean his own house had volunteered to govern an entire neighborhood. The contradiction cut deep, and the people of Freetown would not swallow it quietly. While Bio paraded himself as the new face of African diplomacy, his citizens tore down the mask. Every chant, every torn poster, Every march through Freetown was a declaration. Legitimacy cannot be borrowed. It must be earned. July 4th, 2025, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. The scene could not have been more different. The sun dropped low, but the streets rose high. Ouagadougou became a sea of bodies and voices. Not in protest, but in defense. It was not chaos. It was clarity. Tens of thousands gathered, wrapped in the national flag, carrying signs in Moor, French, and English. They did not say, "We follow Traore." They said, "We are Traore." The chants rolled like thunder. Touch Traore, and you touch our blood. Children sat on shoulders, their cheeks painted with his image. Women raised their voices in songs of Sankara's era, blending grief and defiance into one unstoppable rhythm. Elders stood silently, fists lifted, eyes closed, as if remembering every broken promise, every lost son. Lost, every humiliation imposed from outside. This was not a cult of personality. This was a declaration of identity. Ibrahim Traoré had become more than a man. He was the embodiment of a generation's refusal to kneel again. And beyond Ouagadougou, the echo spread. In Mali, young men painted walls with the words, "No more puppets." In Niger, women blocked roads, pots in hand, banging metal against metal until the sound shook entire neighborhoods. In Burkina's countryside, farmers left their fields, marching barefoot into towns, declaring their soil would never again be for sale. Here, in these parallel images, Freetown and Ouagadougou stood two Africas. One Africa is old. It bows before foreign capitals, believing obedience will bring stability. It wraps betrayal in the language of order. It fears punishment, so it trades dignity for approval. It is weary, compliant, exhausted. The other Africa is new. It does not wait for permission. It rises in dust, in song, in defiance. It understands that freedom costs more than applause, but less than chains. It is young, rough, unpolished, but unafraid. And at the center of this struggle stands ECOWAS, once imagined as a shield of unity. Today, it teeters as an instrument of division. Instead of protecting sovereignty, it punishes it. Instead of shielding its people, it threatens them. Instead of defending independence, it enforces dépendance. If ECOWAS chooses to attack Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Guinea for daring to claim freedom, it must also choose to stand on the wrong side of history, because the people will not accept recolonization dressed in legal language. This is no longer politics. This is identity. This is the right of a continent to declare, "We will not bow." So the images stand side by side. Freetown tearing down its leader, Ouagadougou lifting up its S. The question now is not whether the West will understand. The question is whether Africa will choose. Because in the dust of Ouagadougou, a promise was spoken with fire. The lion will not kneel. The Sahel will not fall. This story is not just about Abuja or Ouagadougou. It is about the unfinished struggle of a continent. In Freetown, we saw the old Africa tired, obedient, clinging to titles handed down by foreign approval. In Ouagadougou, we saw the new Africa defiant, unpolished, but alive with dignity. Between them stands the fate of millions. What Julius Maada Bio spoke in Abuja was not the voice of the people. It was the echo of Brussels, the rhythm of Washington, the shadow of Paris. But what Ibrahim Traoré declared in Ouagadougou cut deeper. Sovereignty is not gifted. It is stolen, and it will only be returned when the people stand ready to seize it. For decades, Africans were told to wait. Wait for aid. Wait for reforms. Wait for democracy approved abroad. But the people have waited long enough. The women who sang in Ouagadougou, the farmers who marched barefoot, the youth who painted faces, all of them carried the same truth. Africa will no longer bow. This is not about one man. Yes, Captain Ibrahim, latest news carries his name across headlines. And Burkina Faso, latest news fills the wires with images of his speeches. But the deeper reality is this. Traoré is not just a leader. He is a mirror. He reflects the will of a people who refuse chains dressed as law. So the choice is before us all. Will Africa continue to wear the mask of obedience, smiling while its dignity is stolen? Or will it embrace the dust, the struggle, the pain, and in doing so, reclaim its soul? If this story moved something in your chest, don't scroll past. Like, share, speak, subscribe, because they hid our history long enough. Let's speak our future out loud. And to you, the sons and daughters of Africa across oceans and generations, remember this moment. The lion will not kneel. The Sahel will not fall. Africa will never again be ruled by those who fear its power. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next story, the kind they still don't want you to hear.